Раз. Дорогие гости, просим вас покинуть зал, так как начинается другая панельная сессия. Благодарю.
All right. Hi, everyone. And I would like to thank you, the previous panel, and invite the new panel to please join me on the stage. Please take your seats. Could we invite, please, everyone to take a seat? We are about to start our next session. Okay, we'll start in 5 minutes as we're waiting for other people to come in. All right, I think we'll begin, just in the interest of time. Unfortunately, the previous panel has finished very late, and we don't have a panel after this one, so we'll just kick off. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayuna Nichayeva. I'm head of Europe, primary markets of the London Stock Exchange. And today is my privilege to host the panel on a very important and critical topic, enhancing corporate governance as a key condition for attracting foreign investors. This panel session aims to discuss current challenges in the area of corporate governance and to share insights on best practices. We will touch on key issues such as strengthening the confidence of foreign investors in the Uzbek market, expanding access to capital markets for Uzbekistani companies, and introducing corporate governance systems in line with international standards. So the main objective of the session is to identify existing problems in corporate governance in this country, discuss solutions, and enhance effective cooperation among stakeholders, such as international financial institutions, major multinational corporations, and local entities. I'm delighted to introduce our speakers. Ahmet Atay, Senior Director of Public Policy, Eurasia and Middle East at the Coca-Cola Company. Philip Gudgeon, Senior Associate at Independent Audit. Darina Kogan-Bellamy, Partner and Head of Capital Markets, CIS at Squire Patton Boggs. Dmitry Zelentsov, Sales and Solution Director at NASDAQ. Murat Kashanov, the CFO of Halyk Bank. Ravshanbek Kadyrov, the First Deputy Chairman of the Management Board at Infinbank. So, I wanted to actually ask our panelists to briefly introduce yourselves, 30 seconds. I will be very tough on time management, actually, because I just think this is, we have so much ground to cover. So maybe starting with you, just introduce yourself and just go down the panel. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for organizing this panel. I believe the topic is very much important and significant for today's evolving market in general. My name is Ravshan Kadyrov. I'm the CFO and First Deputy Chairman of Infinbank, and hopefully I will be able to bring some input and insight in terms of how the transformation of the banking sector going in terms of the state banks and the private banks. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Murat Kashanov. I am Chief Risk Officer and Deputy CEO of Halyk Bank, which is the largest bank in Kazakhstan. I'm also Head of Supervisory Boards, Chairman of the Supervisory Board of our subsidiary in Uzbekistan called Tenge Bank. And as Halyk Bank, we have been listed on London Stock Exchange since 2006.
Hi everyone, my name is Dimitri and I'm the Sales and Solution Director for NASDAQ Market Platforms Division. My most experience coming from the capital market side and the fintech side. But today I will be representing NASDAQ's view on the corporate governance and what, how NASDAQ view the government solutions and the government trends, the corporate governance trends that are happening in the market, because again, we are one of the largest providers of the corporate governance solutions for our clients, and we work with many companies. So that's a brief intro from my side. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's Ahmet Atay. I'm the Regional Public Policy Director in charge of Eurasia and Middle East region at the Coca-Cola Company. Today I will be also talking about the corporate governance approach we have as Coca-Cola system, and also I will be touching one of the main actors which is important in the system, which are the trade associations. Thank you.
Good afternoon everyone, my name is Philip Gudgeon. I'm a management consultant by profession, focusing on strategy, organizational effectiveness and risk management. Worked for many years in large consulting firms, including in this region. Currently, however, focusing on board effectiveness evaluations for United Kingdom corporates. So I work in London, focusing on the topic of board effectiveness.
Hello everyone, my name is Darina Kogan-Bellamy. I am a partner at Squire Patton Boggs and the head of capital markets for Eurasia region. I've done a lot of capital markets transactions in this region over the last 20 years, and I will be focusing on the importance of corporate governance for listing companies on international exchanges. And another thing is that how important the governance is to manage not only the companies but also the panels, as we know that the previous panel ran quite late.
All right, great. Thank you very much, everyone. So let's just dive right into this. Let's set the scene. What is corporate governance? Why is it important? Philip, let's start with you as an expert on board effectiveness. What is corporate governance? What are some of the key aspects Uzbek companies should look at?
Well, I'm not sure I can give you a technical definition today, but I would, I would say the essence of corporate governance is a system that provides oversight over the decisions being made in the company and how the company is being run, and provides assurance to stakeholders in all the areas that those stakeholders have a legitimate interest in. So when we talk about investors, as we have been the last few days, and here they are stakeholders, they're not the only stakeholders. And clearly their interests are well served by a system inside the company which ensures that decision making is of high quality, that's the oversight, and that assurance is given as to risks that may hamper their return on investment and upset things. There are many, of course. The wrong strategy, failure to achieve compliance, poor attention to management quality or to management succession, etc., etc. I think often this is discussed in the context of a supervisory board or a board of directors, and hence the board effectiveness thing. I think a board is a very difficult thing to achieve, to do well. There are two extremes. There's a board that is so distant from what is really happening in the company that effectively it's just rubber stamping what's going on. There's also a board that is too hyperactive and is constantly interfering in what management is doing and is, in effect, double guessing what management is doing the whole time, which is, again, very disruptive. So achieving that balance is very important. I think there's another balance which is very hard to achieve, and that go back to this concept of stakeholders. It's very easy for one or more stakeholders to predominate and to loom large in the discussions of a board, whether that be the major shareholder, the government, or whether that is just the most vociferous person in the room who always gets their point of view across and dominates. And really, a lot of board effectiveness is about having a very good debate, seeing things from different angles, and not allowing one interest to predominate and weigh on decisions that are made. I think this is a challenge everywhere. That it is a challenge still in Uzbekistan is not a surprise to anyone.
Thank you. Murat, my pleasure to come to you because Halyk Bank is an esteemed, a long-standing client of the London Stock Exchange, and I know we spoke before, you have an amazing track record in terms of investor relations and corporate governance. So can you share with us some of the insights? Why is it important for listed companies to pay attention to corporate governance?
Okay, sure, but probably let me start from a bit different angle, because we not only listed on London Stock Exchange for 19 years, we're also the largest financial institution in Kazakhstan, and we have more than 400,000 B2B clients, basically SME and large corporates. And when you start talking with your customer being, for example, individual entrepreneurs, basically you are the owner, you are managing the business, probably there is no question about the corporate governance because you are deciding yourself. But the moment you take money from your friends, from your family, from outsiders, the moment you as an owner decided to hand over the operating business to your friend or someone else, then people start thinking that I need to understand, I need to have the alignment. And when you already coming to the next stage that you want to go public, and or you want to go to the debt capital market and attract the money from institutional investors or attract the minorities, be it the institutional investors or private individuals, then the corporate governance becoming the key of the aspect. Sometimes we're asking the question why the corporate governance is needed and what is in the corporate governance from the both investor side and the issuer side. There are many aspects, and I think esteemed panelists will probably give their own perspective. I probably give one perspective only. I think it's important, one of the most important aspects is capitalization. And then the question would be why you need that capitalization. Obviously, you need that in order first to attract money in the beginning, but then you do not need to forget that attracting the money is one thing. You really need to sustain your relationship with your investor base. It's not about only the client; it's also with your investors. You need to have regular interaction with them. You need really to be open, work on your corporate governance rules, and also to be transparent in what you are doing. And there are a big set of activities which you can do on regular basis.
Yes, things like, for example, when you need to use your shares, listed shares, as cash for M&A, for acquisitions, then valuation is important, right, at this point?
Yeah, definitely, because obviously you as the company want to develop further, and sometimes the organic growth is not enough, and you want to grow through different combinations. You want to buy new company, or your majority shareholder would want to get some additional funding, and basically at that point of time it becomes obvious that if you do that only once in a while, like you went to IPO and then forget about the investors, that will not work. If in 3 years' time you come back and say that we need money, or we want to use our shares in order to invest in another company, it doesn't work. So you really need to do a daily job in order. Your investors need to understand your equity story. Your investors need to understand and be comfortable with the corporate governance. They want to understand what your dividend policy is. They want to understand what is your strategy is. They want to understand how you're dealing with many aspects, starting from dealing with your related parties, how you approaching succession planning for the management, etc., etc. And once they're becoming comfortable with yourself, you get a comfort that whenever you need something on the investor side, they will be by your side, and they will be helping you in order to come along with you in developing your strategy.
Thank you, fantastic. And this actually gives us a really good route to Darina. Darina, you have an enormous amount of experience bringing companies to the stage of IPOs and actually listing them on international exchanges. So before a company goes public, during the IPO preparation, how important is it to improve their governance structure? And what impact does it have ultimately on the success of the IPO?
Thank you very much. It is crucial, probably one of the most crucial requirements, when companies are considering of approaching public markets is to pay attention to and get ready in terms of its corporate governance. Because what is corporate governance? It is managing your company in the transparent and in the well-managed and accountable way. So, when companies think about approaching public markets, they need to understand that investors that are going to be minority investors in the company, they will need to have representatives in the company to understand that the company is going to protect their interests in a well-managed, transparent, and accountable ways. So, and that will definitely directly impact the demand for the company's securities and the pricing. So it is very, very crucial, to get corporate governance in order. It is very crucial for companies to think of approaching this exercise not from ticking the box or lip syncing, but to really get ready, identify the crucial elements such as who is going to be the independent directors on the audit and risk committee that will be responsible for financial performance of the company, who is going to be the independent directors that are going to be representing investors later on for remuneration and basically making decision for executive pay, who is going to be the independent director that will be responsible for nomination committee, which will be responsible for renewing the board. So these are going to be crucially important questions that investors will pay attention to, and will definitely impact the pricing of the shares. And I'm going to take a moment and say, what is happening in Uzbekistan is fantastic. All the reforms that are happening and we are seeing here with our own eyes, they're very impressive. And I think that, this is a crucial moment when the company is going to go through the privatization program via ECM, ECM deals, is to think about the corporate governance reform as well, because when investors look at not only the company but also countries, and when we speak about the country discount, this should be the country premium. That if there is the right reform and pay attention to the corporate governance at each level of the companies that are going to be approaching the market, there will be a market premium if the reform is done correctly. So that would be my advice.
And I would just, if you switch off your microphone, okay. I would definitely agree, and to your point, Darina, in terms of how much has already been done. So in Uzbekistan, as you know, the finance ministry of Uzbekistan, some of the key state-owned banks and entities such as Uzbekneftgaz, Navoi, so NMMC, have already raised international capital via Eurobonds listed on the London Stock Exchange. And in total, these companies have raised over 12 billion US dollars equivalent in three currencies, Euro, USD, and Uzbek Sum, since 2019. So this year alone, these companies have raised over 2.5 billion USD equivalent already from international investors. So a lot of progress has been done on the governance side. You see independent directors, you see companies complying with reporting requirements and so on. So we're just very much looking forward to see, the continued progress in this area. So moving to Ahmed, there are specific corporate governance practices and frameworks that actually help attract international investors. So some of the most successful companies in this area actually are already implementing these practices. So can you talk about those, and how do Uzbek companies also balance those requirements with local regulatory frameworks?
Thank you, Aina. Thank you for the question. Indeed, it's my honor to be part of this great panel. I would be, as Coca-Cola system, we are active in the country, in this lovely country, for a long time. So today, my answers will be also the reflections of the experiences we had in this country up to now. So I would be first also like to underline that what we are talking about today is not corporate governance. It's good, successful corporate governance. Corporate governance doesn't mean that all the things which are done under corporate governance are successful or good. Of course, there are some bad examples, but just to give you an insight on how the practices we had in our companies can be also enlightening for you, this is the way I will be positioning it in my answers. So since corporate governance, as a definition, as Philip also underlined, is the system of rules, practices, by which the companies, organizations are managed, controlled, directed, it's super important to have such a system within the company. So this importance indeed comes from the operations, to have successful operations and to have sustainable, continued operations for a company. The good corporate governance indeed fosters ethical business practices which lead to financial viability, and this in turn can attract more foreign direct investment into the country and continue to increase the value of the company. So in that sense, corporate governance, good corporate governance really makes sense for the countries, for the companies, and for the investors, which is a key factor, key area that they are also looking into in detail when making an investment decision. So there is a very critical keyword from my perspective, which is balance. So the good corporate governance really requires the balancing of interests of different stakeholder groups. Which stakeholder groups we are talking about? As Philip mentioned, there are different stakeholder groups which are subject to the good corporate governance practices, which are employees, shareholders, lenders, suppliers, local and central government, community members. So these all stakeholders are really key to be observed, to be managed, and also their interests are really key to the success of good corporate governance practices. When we look at the main principles, maybe we can talk about fairness. The boards have to be really fairly treating all the stakeholders. We can talk about transparency. They need to, the boards of the companies have to also provide accurate and timely information on critical matters like financial information, risk management, potential risks, and mitigation ways to their stakeholders. And also the boards have to identify the risks in advance and also have to find the ways how to mitigate them. The boards of the companies are responsible for the oversight of the corporate matters for sure, and the boards are accountable for the purposes of the activities and the conduct of the activities they are having within the company. So all the information and the esteemed panelists' contributions up to now indeed are showing that there are different types of corporate governance practices, models. Maybe we can talk about the Anglo-American model, like Philip mentioned, where the shareholders are more powerful, and also there's a continental model where we can talk about the stakeholder engagement is indeed much more important for the companies. Coming lastly to the successful practices in terms of good corporate governance, what we can start with is the local context. The companies should really relate themselves with the local context, respect local cultural and regulatory matters. So this is number one, and this is really important for a company that wants to make an investment in a country. That's number one. And this is, of course, coming with collaboration with the regulators. The collaboration with the regulators in the local and central level are key for a good corporate governance practice. We can also talk about the leveraging global expertise. This is a very key practice which we also take into consideration for good corporate governance practices, which comes with adopting internationally accepted, recognized governance standards. And finally, one other critical item in having a good corporate governance practice is making use of the technology. So this is one of the hot topics nowadays, but AI and all new tech solutions for good corporate governance practices. This is really important now, and it will be much more important in the near future for sure. Thank you.
Fantastic. Would agree with that for sure in terms of utilizing technology to create annual reports, to do annual shareholder meetings, to get feedback from investors. And I know that a lot of roadshows, non-deal roadshows, are actually now half virtual, half in person. Back in pre-pandemic times, you had to fly around the world. Now you can save your time as the CEO and do some of those meetings virtually. Right. So moving on to Ravshan. Obviously, you had massive experience both in the state-owned sector for banking and now in the private sector. Share with us your insights on the transformation that you've seen in the banking sector and how the approach to corporate governance has changed.
Thank you. I think my fellow panelists did a very good job in terms of providing insight into overall importance of the corporate governance in relation to managing virtually any organization. But I think I want to more emphasize the relevance of corporate governance in the time of change, in the time of transformation. What does that happen to the corporate governance? Does it change with the organization itself? Or do we first transform and then change the corporate governance? Well, as the practice and experience shows in the transformation phase of both private and state banks in Uzbekistan, it seems that the corporate governance is at the very heart of transformation. And it's actually a prerequisite for any successful transformation. Now, I understand that many of my fellow state bankers may say that they are overwhelmed with all of the moving targets today that we see in the country in general and specifically in the banking sector, with about 36 banks, more than 100 microfinance institutions. Competition is becoming fierce. We have new players in the market. International banks are coming into the market. And obviously state banks are overwhelmed with trying to gain as much as possible quick wins, low-hanging fruits, and trying to do everything at the same time, which is basically strategic management, enhancing risk management policies, implementing best practices and compliance, at the same time changing the technological side of things in terms of renewing, updating, enhancing the core banking systems. And I think in the midst of all these changes, the experience shows that for several years now, state banks are undergoing this doing everything at the same time in order to progress as fast as possible. But I think the experience shows that sequencing and consistency is very important. In other words, trying to do corporate governance in the midst of everything that I just mentioned may not yield as effective results as if you rewind back and set the corporate governance first and foremost in terms of changing the supervisory board members to independent ones, in terms of aligning the vision and strategy of the banking in general, supervisory board versus the management board. And as the example of the OTP shows, which I would think is a relatively good example and a positive precedent for the privatization of a large state-owned bank, changing supervisory board members to independent is not the only successful outcome. It looks like the experience shows that in our particular situation, it's also very important to have the changes in the management board as well, in order to have the visions and the strategy aligned, at least in the key positions such as CEO, Chief Risk Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Technology Officer. That way, I think the strategy, the mission of the transformation will align. So that's why I think it's very important to set the corporate governance practices first, to make sure that independent supervisory board members not only participate in the board, but also play a key role in terms of being the chairs of key committees such as risk, such as internal audit. So I think after we set those bare minimum rules of corporate governance in the state banks, then the transformation itself will work itself out in terms of developing a strategy, proper business model, proper operations, putting together risk management, identifying risk policies, risk appetite of the bank, and obviously, depending on that business model, trying to enhance the IT infrastructure, trying to attract and retain top talent. So that's why I think it will be very important going forward that the corporate governance is emphasized as a primary prerequisite for transformation, not only at state banks, but private banks as well. And I think a little bit of a tendency, interesting, that we're noticing today is that not only state banks are transforming, but private banks are also transforming as well. Because what we see is happening basically in the banking sector is that because private banks, especially the ones with the foreign equity, who already implemented best practices long time ago, who already have the policies, procedures in place and corporate governance in place, are of course advanced throughout the past 15, 20 years when they've been in the market. But what's happening now is that that advancement took those private banks 20, sometimes 25, 30 years to achieve. So right now, all the transformation that is being done so hastily and in expeditious manner at the state bank level is basically state banks are trying to do whatever the private banks did in terms of corporate governance, transformation, best practices in 3 years. Whatever they did in 25 or 30 years, the private banks. So that's why private banks are also seeing that the state banks are moving in the right direction. Competition is increasing. International players are coming into the market. And that's why private banks are also taking transformation to the next level in terms of thinking about IPO, in terms of thinking about AI, in terms of thinking about Internet of Things, and advancing further. And I think it will be from now on very interesting for international investors to observe this sort of a dynamic where we have the changes both at the state bank side and the private banks.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm sure, Philip, you have something to add, and maybe if you could comment also on the role of the chair and how important it is.
Yes, indeed, Ayuna. I think in any board, you want to have a rigorous debate and a rigorous discussion, right? You've got differing interests, as Ahmed mentioned, different stakeholders who are coming at things from different angles. Sometimes those very interests, compete. So you want a rigorous debate. There will be differences of opinion. Conflict is unavoidable. Unfortunately, however, sometimes conflict can be extremely damaging. So in my personal experience, in boards that I've been looking at, have seen situations where, a major shareholder on the board has fallen out in a very kind of vociferous fashion, had a blowout really with other members of the board. And of course, relationships get damaged. The board, as a result, is only half effective. So this can be extremely damaging. And I think, as you said, I think the key ingredient here, the key thing that can save you from that, is the role of a good chairman or chairwoman, a chair, right? Because that person has first of all got to balance the different interests. That person has got to know when a particular debate is on track or when it's going off track. Bring it back to know when to cut off a debate, know when to let a debate run, know how to work behind the scenes, outside, take something offline, discuss the point at issue. And it's not a question of stage managing what happens in the boardroom in an artificial way. It's a way of making sure that it's not derailed by that. So the personal qualities of the board chair are extremely important. And I think you need someone who can step back from the detail and go back to first principles when required. Someone who is respected for their independence of their mind. They're not in bed with, the major shareholder. They're not always looking out for the interests of one particular interest group. They are capable of reconciling different interests. But someone who has spine, who can stand up to that. So that's what it's.
Brilliant. And building on that, turning to Dmitry. So Nasdaq has done a lot of board evaluations, and you have seen some recent global challenges and priorities that boards of directors are experiencing across the globe. So in your view, what basically keeps board awake at night?
Thank you, Ines. Yeah, we focus, the Nasdaq goes beyond the traditional kind of board evaluation practices. We focus on board advisory and board adjacent practices such as the succession management planning, the CEO evaluations, and director onboarding. The cornerstone of the thought leadership that Nasdaq has in this space is the governance pulse survey that we conduct with more than 1,000 board professionals, board members, executives, and the governance professionals across the world, as well as the Nasdaq board advisory services that we provide to our customers. It allows us basically to analyze and to see what are the prevailing trends and the priorities of the board, the risk perceptions, and the evolving government practices exist in the market. In terms of the companies that we work with, there are, from the advisory perspective, we work with hundreds of board and leadership. We do the reviews of more than 100 of. We've already done reviews of more than 100 reviews of the board and leadership across the widest spectrum of organizations. So the companies we work with, they range from FTSE 100 companies, the S&P 500 companies, but we also work with the companies which are, let's say, have a fewer than 20 people. So it's kind of private companies. So what we see today is that the board is facing the mounting pressure to move from reactive to more proactive approach. And the key trends that we observe from the service and when working with the companies is I would say I'll split them into two major pillars, which is the technology risk. So we talked about the AI, but AI can be again considered as a strategic opportunity, but at the same time it's the potential risk for the board to make sure that they understand these risks and that they act accordingly to these risks, right? There is another element of the technology risk, which is the cybersecurity, because the growing complexity of the corporate IT systems and the various kind of technologies force the board to think about how they can protect their know-hows, how they can protect their companies. So again, there is a huge focus on the cybersecurity as part of the board of directors responsibility. The third one of the technology risk is the shift in board composition. So we know that it's easy to find a board directors that are coming from the traditional backgrounds like finance or legal, but it's very hard to, it's what I call a traditional skill set, but it's very hard to find the people with experience in digital transformation, technical expertise. So you need to have a very diverse and forward-looking board in order to make sure that you make the right decisions going forward. The second big pillar which we see is concerning our customers that we work with is the people and the culture risk. So in terms of the organizational culture, you need to have it's at the heart of every organization. You make sure that your culture is aligning with the priorities, strategic priorities of the company and the goals of the company. The talent and retention planning is another aspect to that, because we see that the challenges. It's one of the most important challenges that the companies face is a lack of institutional memory or the strategic continuity, basically. So you need to make sure that you keep the people within the company, and that's how you get these things right in terms of the retaining this talent within the company.
And things like share options, share incentives, yeah?
Share options, some maybe non-financial rewards that you can create for the people. But the idea is that you need to identify those talents. It's about identifying who has this institutional memory. Sometimes companies don't realize that, and that's why over the time they lose these people, and basically the other indicators, the growth and all other things fell apart because of that, right? Probably the last bit on that is the succession planning. So you need to have a contingency plans for leadership transitions. So I think something like 78% of the from the interviews that we've done, the 78% governance professionals indicate that that they have a succession plan in place, but probably only 42% reported that the plan is formalized and reviewed regularly by the board and delegated committee. Just to conclude on that, I think the key takeaways is that the boards can no longer afford to operate on the legacy assumptions. They have to be agile, diverse, and future-oriented, dealing with both financial and non-financial risks. And I think another key takeaway is coming to the point that I made earlier is about the finding a good composition of the board. So not only dealing with the traditional experts or expertise that people have on the board, but finding those people who have these technological skills. They were part of the transformation progress, so they understand future and current technology risks that the companies may face. So I think these are the two key takeaways that we've seen from working with our customers on the corporate governance level.
Thank you. Love this. Love that you mentioned institutional memory. I've been with the London Stock Exchange for 15 years. I believe I do have that institutional memory. I remember 3 previous CEOs. So, and knowing this history of the business and keeping these people is important, even if I say so myself. And then what you mentioned about succession planning. Very often, if a company loses their CEO and there is no succession planning, it's a disaster. So you have to have contingency. Board diversity, I think you mentioned diversity of thought as well, to avoid groupthink, to make sure that risks is managed. So turning to the expert on my panel, Murat, Tell us your secrets. How do you do it? So actual practical tips and tricks. How do you maintain a relationship with your minority institutional shareholders? How do you make sure that your governance, to Ahmed's point, is successful?
Yeah, I also wanted to refer to what Ahmed said. I think you referred to all set of stakeholders. All of them are important. I think most of them are already present and relevant for companies in Uzbekistan. But I think yet the most, let's say, rigorous and the most active and anxious group of stakeholders yet to come to Uzbekistan companies, I think it's institutional minority investors. And we already saw plans of Uzbekistan to bring a big set of large companies to IPOs. And I think from that perspective, it's really important to understand how to deal with these group investors, what they can bring to you, and what you should be bringing to them in order to get a value from you as a company. Obviously, when you go to IPO, you'll start from your equity story. So you will do whatever you have to do in order to explain what is the value proposition, what is your strategy, what you will bring a value to the stakeholders, and what the value you will be bringing to your shareholders. But as I said in my previous response, is that it is important to get the framework which will ensure that you are remaining in constant dialogue with your shareholders. First of all, you need to do a regular reporting. It's not annual reports like audit reports placed on your website. I'm talking about the, for example, quarterly press releases, quarterly reporting, quarterly investor calls. You have to be ready to have early morning calls with your Asian investors from Singapore. You have to be ready to have calls with your US shareholders late in the evening. Whenever there is economic changes, whenever there is new regulation, be ready that your investor will be demanding for a quick call in order to get updates. Don't hide, and be ready and have your management accessible to these calls. Not just say that this is our IR manager would deal with your question. The minorities would like to get and love to get access to your top management in order to get that comfort. Do not hide from investors whenever you have some difficult situations, and I think they will be value your openness. Do non-deal roadshows, explain your story, explain your strategy, and I think that interactions is also important factor in order to get the really important feedback. And the investors really would like your company to develop. They really want to give you good advice in order how you can incorporate their knowledge, because they have exposure to hundreds of the companies. They understand what is doing well, what is not going well. Just to give you an example, we as Halyk Bank having that regular interaction which I mentioned, and within our, let's say, a larger corporate governance and IR area, we make 3 big changes during the last 18 months. So we upgraded our dividend policy, we introduced long-term incentive program for the management, and we launched the buyback program. All these changes were a result of the feedback which we're receiving from our minority shareholders. So this is the important element, the loophole which you, the feedback which you would like to introduce. When it comes to corporate governance, I think the best thing about being public that you can make a benchmarking. And from that perspective, look at your companies from your same segment. If you're a bank, you can refer to the banks, not only in the country, but also in the region. Study their reports, annual reports, ESG reports, what they're doing, what is, let's say, important from different aspects, how they're dealing with risk management, with cybersecurity, compliance, activities and function. There are a lot of other benchmark methods. Like, for example, there are a number of companies which are providing ESG or sustainability reports, like MSCI ESG Research, Sustainalytics. Look at their methodologies. Look what is important from that company's perspective, because they are providing that service to the investor base. With Halyk Bank, for example, during one of the non-deal roadshows, understood from our shareholder that we've been rated by MSCI ESG Research. that is not the rating which you would solicit as a issuer. You are not paying for that. This is the importance from your investment community, because MSCI is one of the largest provider of the indices, and because there is interest from the minority shareholder base, from the institutional investor base, they're rating the issuers. And we understood that our rating is single B, so that is not something which we were happy with. We started the methodologies and we start rigorously looking what we can do in order to improve. In 3 years' time, we upgraded our rating from single B to double B, and last year upgraded to triple B.
Congratulations.
And we get a lot of positive response from the investors. So this is just a number of, let's say, practical examples how we deal with our minorities in order to improve the corporate governance within our organization.
Very valuable. Darina, I'm sure you have a couple comments to add.
I think that, you know, Murat, what you said is amazing, and this is exactly the point. You know, we are all driving home, is that the minority investors, they need to be, they need to feel protected. They need to feel that they're represented, and of course, the independent board and the management, they have to work together in order to assure that protection and that care, and of course, that then translates into this magnificent achievement that, you know, your bank has experienced. Huge congratulations to you, by the way. That's amazing.
Right, we have about 10 minutes left only, so please bear with us. I would like to invite some questions from the audience. So I'll give you a couple minutes to think about a question, please. And then in the meantime, while you're thinking, I'm going to turn to Ravshan and then to Ahmed, but I will ask some questions. So Ravshan, you talked about transformation. What about the support from government and regulators? We're seeing a huge amount of support from the government overall, and this forum is part of this massive support. What else needs to happen for the banking sector and beyond?
I like how Ayuna tries to keep us on our toes, very London Stock Exchange style. I tried to summarize the point. So far, we identified that the prerequisite for running successfully any organization is corporate governance. We also mentioned that prerequisite of corporate governance very important in transformation phase as well. But I would like to a little bit maybe draw attention to the fact what is the prerequisite for successful development of corporate governance and implementation in Uzbekistan. And I believe it's the government reforms. Because when the tone is from the top, when the government itself is approaching to run the state affairs in a more or less liberal manner, when all the branches of the government are functioning properly to create the system of checks and balances, that obviously translates and trickles down into appropriate corporate governance culture of state-owned enterprises, thereby to privatizing them, transforming them, issuing IPOs, and obviously to private sector as well. And I think in general, if we talk about more of a global scale of things and state of affairs currently, and its relevance to Uzbekistan is obviously we understand that the global economic landscape is changing today. United States is challenging the globalization as we know it. The shifts, tectonic shifts are happening as we see it. But obviously the means that is being done and the timing could be up for a challenge and debate. But if we step back a little bit and think about maybe it is time for globalization 2.0. Maybe the globalization that we talked about and know outlived itself. So the question is, what is the challenge for Uzbekistan in the next coming decade? And I think the challenge for Uzbekistan in the next coming decade will be to find its appropriate strategic relevance in the global supply chain, in international capital markets, but do it in a sustainable and consistent manner. And I think that's where the corporate governance plays an important role, because if you take all the state-owned enterprises which account for a large portion of the GDP of the country, and you take the private sector, which is usually the backbone of any economy, all the way from the top to bottom, corporate governance is very high on the agenda. So I really think that in terms of its relevance, and we the Uzbek people as true patriots, I believe and I hope, would want to not only remain growing on the account of production, agriculture, export of raw materials, I believe we would want to move ambitiously towards AI, towards Internet of Things, towards anything related to IT research and development in order to create higher value added economy that will in turn will create higher value added jobs that will hopefully in turn ensure the successful integration of Uzbekistan and its expansion in global market, thereby creating local wealth for Uzbek people. Thank you.
What an uplifting message. Let's give this a round of applause. Fantastic. Right, so I'm turning to you, the audience. Please, I need one question from you. Who's brave? Who has a question? No? Did I see any? Okay, that's fine. Right, so while they're still thinking, I'm turning to Ahmed. So, trade associations, what role do they play in promoting strong corporate governance standards among member companies? And how do they help to facilitate the alignment of these standards with the expectations of foreign investors?
Thank you, Ayana. If you are talking about corporate governance, it's to my view, it's really impossible not to talk about trade business associations. So they are one of the key actors of this system, which has a pivotal role for the success of good corporate governance. So they are important in many senses for many reasons, but mainly for the regulatory advocacy efforts that they can have on behalf of the member companies, and also being a platform to convey the key messages, relevant messages, important messages to the relevant stakeholders, mainly at the government side. And they are really critical in creating an industry, common industry voice, which makes such organizations and their members much more stronger in their engagements with the relevant stakeholders. So when we look at the corporate governance perspective, how these organizations, these trade business associations can be helpful in improving and promoting good corporate governance in the country, of course there are different ways how these organizations can be helpful. Maybe we can start with the setting industry standards. This is really one of the key assets of the trade associations, that they can be bringing some benchmarks and best practices to the country, which will be helpful for the member companies to uplift their corporate governance practices and to improve the application of these best practices within their own operations. One other element that they can be supporting the member companies of them is the providing training education programs to their members, and also having some certification programs which will be also helpful to the member companies in improving their corporate governance standards. These associations can be also the facilitator in between the member companies for them to learn from each other, to share case studies, success stories, and this can be one of the ways the member companies can also improve their corporate governance standards compared to the others by learning from each other. So this is another way of the benefits of the trade associations. One other is, of course, facilitating the dialogue with the global investors. So since these trade associations can be playing the role of being a bridge in between their members and the global investors, they can make their members to be much more aware of the expectations in terms of corporate governance, what do these global investors have, and improve and change their standards, corporate governance practices accordingly. So this is one other way. One other important element is incorporating corporate social responsibility. So this is one of the key to the success of the global investors, and this is also one of their main expectations, to have these practices within the companies. So trade associations can be also helping the member companies in terms of understanding the main expectations in terms of CSR activities and making them part of the corporate governance practices of the member companies. So finally, I would also like to touch upon crisis management and risk mitigation. The trade associations can be also helpful to the member companies in terms of in times of crisis, to help them with the relevant solutions, to be again an intermediate bridge in between the relevant government entity in general and the member company, and also they can help them to mitigate the risks which can arise from such crises. So to end up my words, I would like to underline that as Coca-Cola, we are really proud to be members and being members of and working with many trade business associations in the country, in Uzbekistan. And we see that there are very talented organizations like that. And with our all resources, we are always ready to help all member companies for the improvement of their corporate governance standards and practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 3 minutes left, and I believe we have one question, so it's going to be one last question from... Do we have a microphone? Okay, go ahead, and I'll repeat it in the microphone. Yeah. All right, so the question is, how important is sanctions compliance in the context of geopolitical situations? How does this impact businesses? Who wants to take this one?
Well, as a lawyer, I would advise it is very, very important. The compliance with the sanctions regime is important, and as part of the compliance, as anti-bribery laws, money laundering, and all the laws, and of course having committees and the corporate governance oversighting, and implementing it in companies' internal controls, it is quite important. And of course, all the agencies of OFAC and the UK regulators, they look at sanctions also, and look at situations, case by case scenarios as well. Companies can approach the agencies and talk to them about the licenses as well, of receiving certain licenses for business operation continuity, but it is very important.
Right, thank you very much. With this, I would like to thank our fantastic panel. Please give them a round of applause. And if you have further questions, feel free to ask those on the side or in the breakout area. Thank you.